Hello, hello. It's Camille at Let's Get Oral with my bestie co-host, Jonathan Dornell. Joining me today in the studio is Dr. Emly Stein. I'm so excited to have her here. We have so much synergy. I've been following her journey for quite some time at Primal Health. She comes with a PhD in microbiology, and she did her postdoc as well in immunology. And she has so much to share with her work in the oral health space. I'm just going to get right to it because I know I have a lot of questions. So hi, welcome, Emly. Thank you for coming.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you located right now?
Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Ah, that's the home of my people.
There we go.
I want you to take us through kind of how, because Jonathan and I are similar to yourself, where we have PhDs and somehow we landed in the oral cavity without necessarily realizing that that was the direction we were going to go. So how did you find yourself in the oral cavity?
I know, right? So I was at Berkeley studying a really cool microbe that lives in the soil, but works as a little community together. And you can't even isolate it by itself. It won't grow. It's called Myxococcus anthus, the coolest bug, very social, goes through developmental cycles, pretty cool stuff, and nerding out on that for 6 years.
It goes through a developmental cycle, like it gets smarter as it gets older?
Actually, when they get in some kind of a way, when it gets super stressed, there are a subset of the population that raises their hand and becomes the sacrificial lambs that coat the outer surface of this little fruiting body, and the inner cells turn into these spores and to preserve the species. And so I was trying to understand what the signaling was cell to cell and who decides who's going to be the vegetative cell that's going to die.
Very cool.
Versus who's going to. So cool. Yeah. So I was doing that. And then I really wanted to do something with more application. And so my family is plagued by autoimmune disease. So I went across the pond to Stanford for almost 8 years. And I studied autoimmune disease with Bill Robinson and his group, studying the neuroendocrine immune axis as it relates to rheumatoid arthritis, MS, a little bit in lupus.
I'm going to stop the train there because that was a little time ago. And I would say that it was probably pretty controversial at the time. Can you tell us about being in kind of a controversial space?
Yeah. I mean, gosh, we just realized that there was the genetic haplotypes that give rise to risk factors in the HLA, category that gives you a predisposition for autoimmune disease, in particular rheumatoid arthritis, and the overlay with habits such as smoking. So smoking plus these genetic mutations equals increased risk factors for rheumatoid. And then the undercurrent below that, there was always this discussion amongst the rheumatologists that usually people that have had 3 or 4 main big courses of antibiotics in their childhood or adolescence or whatnot were at also risk of developing autoimmune diseases. And so we've always known that you need to have a 1-2 punch in order to trigger a first flare, and that a microbial antigen is usually part of that signal.
Right.
And so so that's basically what we were studying. And then, my grandmother, who had RA at the time, she was my bestie, and we would play Scrabble online, because she was in Wisconsin and I was in Palo Alto, and she would beat us all the time. I had to get our lab involved too, and to try and we beat her. But one day she didn't play, and then I got a call from my mom saying that she'd had a stroke. And it turned out when I flew back to Wisconsin to see if she's okay and whatever, she's in hospice for a while, but she had a tooth pulled the day before and then stroke the next day. And I didn't know the rates. I do now know the rates. They've done all sorts of Medicaid and Medicare retrospective analyses and show that over tens and tens of thousands of claims, there is this 50% increased risk of a heart attack or a stroke after you get a tooth pulled or a dental implant placed. And that risk lasts for 4 weeks. And that risk doesn't normalize back to baseline until 6 months after the procedure. So,
Wow.
woo, so yeah, so then I started biohacking grandma.
That's where it all begins, right?
That's how I got in the oral cavity.
I feel like there's a song we could adapt to that, huh?
Right.
Wow. So what was your first impulse in the biohacking angle?
Well, first thing luckily I had a swab in my backpack and stuff. So I grabbed her oral microbes because I knew once my uncle told me she'd had a dental, I knew those guys went into her bloodstream, and I knew it triggered the clotting cascade. And so, and she's already prone to issues anyways through her RA. So she was an at-risk candidate, and I wish they would have done a little bit of a cleanup before they did an extraction to really minimize the risk. And so I just didn't want her to lose any more teeth. That was my goal. And I looked at whatever I could on the that was prescription or over the counter. And I was like, these things will actually harm her good bacteria. She needs them. And nothing's going to empower them. Everything else is quite toxic and would really screw up her soft tissue or activate her could trigger a flare or anything like that if she took it on a regular basis. So I was just like, I'm going to have to figure that out myself.
Wow.
So that's what I did.
Okay. All right. So with regard to, you had an understanding at the time about how the beneficial bacteria can protect us and that you didn't want to disrupt that. I would say that currently, this is a lot of pushback is that in the dental space specifically, a lot of oral health providers know that the accumulation in totality is a risk, right? Plaque abundance is a risk factor for disease. And I think we can all say that when you kind of look globally at the issues, that is kind of the main risk factor. However, when we go more nuanced, how do we angle, I mean, I have my own thoughts and opinions, but how do we kind of maintain the beneficial while getting rid of the rest? What is your approach and how have you kind of tackled that issue?
Yeah. So basically what we stumbled upon is a selective way to favor certain microbes over others in a biome, and we're doing that through metabolism. And so, in the mouth in particular, because the majority of human beings love our carbohydrates,
yes,
we tend to accumulate microbes that whether they're pro-inflammatory or beneficial, really can digest carbohydrate quite effectively.
Are you talking straight sugar or are you talking more nuanced carbs?
All the above.
Is there a difference?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a difference. Yeah, there is a difference. Some of your Maserati type microbes that grow quickly and are very, very, their fuel is high octane sugars. So simpler the better for them.
We would think of strep mutans, perhaps.
Strep mutans, strep, staphs. And then you have your Hondas and your Toyotas, right? That can work with that aren't going to get over the finish line quickly from a growth perspective, but they can adapt and use a different kind of octane fuel. And so they can feed off of protein or lipids or other kinds of things. And so what we've been finding over time is that, like with my grandmother, her biome was extremely narrow. She didn't have diversity, and it was really a carbohydrate driven ecosystem. And so what we stumbled on was a way to force the microbes into a little bit of a keto diet, and that then reset the population. And so it went from narrow dysbiotic ecosystem to more of a little bit of a rainforest where there's more checks and balances just by forcing a dietary pressure in that ecosystem.
So with the different octanes, well, first I should say, how are you forcing a keto system? And was your grandma amenable to dietary changes?
No, she loved her, she loved her sugar in her coffee every day.
Yes.
And she loved her white bread and not sourdough. And, very Midwest diet.
Okay.
Right. So, and it's very starchy. And so, and all of her vegetables were entirely cooked down.
Yes.
It's like the old school diet. Right.
Yeah.
And she had a history also. Her mom, I found out, was in dentures in her 20s.
Wow.
Yeah. So, microbiomes can be
Sure.
inherited by the maternal. And so obviously she inherited some not so good microbes. And yeah, so she wouldn't change. So I had to basically figure out what nutritional carrot and what nutritional stick to apply at the same time. Because if you apply just one signal, microbes design around it. You have to apply 2 signals at the same time to really get them, just like the immune system, 2 signals to get a reaction, 2 signals to bacteria and fungus to get them going down a path. So we found a postbiotic, which is a derivative from microbial fermentation of plant material and starches it's a cyclized non-fermentable fiber that blocks microbes, doesn't matter if it's a yeast or a bacteria, from taking up any sugar.
Wow.
And it also blocks the exoenzymes that they secrete that make plaque. So the dextrinases and things that make those plaque chains or dextrin chains, it blocks them. And then at the same time, we're giving so that's the molecular nutritional stick. And then we're giving them a nutritional carrot at the same time, which is you'll like this, a B vitamin.
Nice.
A vitamin B6.
Okay.
Yep. But it's the active form. So that's the cofactor for the enzymes. And then we're giving them a little bit of a steak to break down that amino acid, L-arginine. So they're chopping that up. At the same time, they're sugar starved. They're making ammonia, nitric oxide, nitrate, nitrite from that initial L-arginine. And then that's facilitating in time course studies we've done. 24 hours later, there's a lasting keto-like effect on the microbiome, even though they're able to eat sugar again, because you plug them up once they upregulate their transport systems so they can start eating sugar again. And that's why you have to hit them throughout the day or periodically, especially at night when you're sleeping. They're active, and just have them go keto.
Wow. Okay. Jonathan, do you have any questions before I go further?
Well, first, thank you for explaining postbiotic and the mechanisms when utilizing such a biotic for fine-tuning these signals, right? So one question I had is, since you starting with biohacking your grandmother and going down this journey, as a microbiologist, did you already have insights in wanting to utilize a postbiotic paired with any other, or?
I'll be honest. I literally turned my kitchen, because I was a postdoc at the time, so I knew this was for grandma, so I didn't want to do anything at Stanford. And I literally ordered what I could off of Amazon. I had my friends that were in their startups order pathogens for me. So I had Lactobacillus acidophilus, strep mutans. I had PG in my fridge.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've done that before.
So,
for sure.
Yep. And so you kind of know how to set up a BSL-2 lab, but and then you have to go pick up the pathogens because no one's going to deliver it to your apartment. But I did high throughput screening because I didn't know what was going to help at the time. And then these non-fermentable fibers kept on popping up because I wanted to get anything that was safe, that wouldn't interfere with grandma's Coumadin, that she could consume every day, that wasn't going to screw up her GI tract or upset her immune system and cause a flare. So I was really, really careful. I did a lot of pre-reading on all the ingredients I bought, but we screened at least 200 molecules to see what would affect her biofilm in a way that wouldn't create acid, wouldn't make a lot of plaque, would grow the decent microbes and then halt the growth of the harmful microbes. That's what we came up with that combination.
That's fascinating.
There's murmurings from some labs about the use of L-arginine in oral care. There's like a low bubbling fear of, will that empower some of those perio-pathogens because
Hmm.
of the, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good question. So we're using it, and then we're finding that certain microbes like lactobacillus are actually making it, the L-arginine, after a certain period of time in our time course studies in human mouse and animal mouse. And so what I can say with strong evidence clinically is that over time, when you cause the ecosystem of the mouth, the population to shift keto, you just created a heck of a lot of pressure that they wind up out competing then the slower growers, which are these anaerobes, right? Which do eat a lot of, they're egg glycolytic, so they eat like amino acids, they eat some lipids. They fester and they're anaerobes, so they're way below the gum line. And by having their near neighbors in that subgingival biofilm, also known as plaque, when their near neighbors are also eating the same diet, and then they're making the nitric oxide and they're increasing the pH in the tissue and making it more aerobic. The harmful microbes, the red complex in particular, those guys are not able to hang. They're getting outcompeted. So by 6 weeks on this microbial diet plan that we're enforcing, you're seeing red complex decrease by 90%.
Wow.
In these clinicals.
Do you think that without kind of that intervention of keto starvation with just a straight L-arginine approach, because there are some in market toothpaste that are mainly L-arginine, would you maintain a fear around potential promotion of perio-pathogens, or would you think that potentially you're helping the beneficials more?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Remember I mentioned, if you're only giving one signal to the microbes like that L-arginine, you're gonna not see the effect that we're seeing.
Yeah. Okay.
But because we looked at just single molecule alone influences, and L-arginine alone doesn't do anything. We found in our studies.
L-arginine and zinc, maybe?
Perhaps.
Excellent. So there's hope.
Yeah. So, I mean, because the microbes, you're not affecting the majority of the microbes in that ecosystem in the mouth cavity are sugar eating, and you're throwing two molecules that aren't going to deter or change what they're doing at all.
Right.
So it's really that mechanism is a very different mechanism. And so, I don't see how that's going to have as much benefit.
Right. So you have worked your technology into two different platforms, humans and animals.
Yes.
So you started with grandma, and then how did it evolve?
Yeah. A couple of years later, I rescued a Cocker Spaniel. She was black and white. I'm a sucker for black and white Cocker Spaniels. So, she was up in Central Washington at a humane society, and she was neglected. She was used to breed. She was caged her whole life. And I was just like, I need to, help this being. So cashed in all my frequent flyer miles, went up there, rented a car. They said she needed a dental, but when they brought her in, she smelled like death. So I'm like, yeah, she needs a dental. And so
poor babe.
We drove all the way back down to the Bay Area with all the windows open.
Oh, God.
Because it was so bad.
Yeah, that perio breath is real.
Real. And then, we basically made a pit stop at home. And then I'm like, she was obviously distressed. So then we had to go to the animal hospital, actually in Oakland, to where she got 21 teeth extracted that day.
21?
21 pump full of antibiotics to save her life.
Wow.
Her name's Tinsley. Yeah. And 21, like $6,000 on my credit card.
Whew.
But but saved her life. And then I started hacking dogs. So and that led to Teef, which is our brand for animals. And that's now been we did a 300 dog study a year long. We've done stomatitis studies in cats. Wow. Now we're doing a zoo study in multi-species. Because basically what we're learning is if you're a mammal and you have a mouth and you eat any carbohydrates, your inflammation and soft tissue rate, go up. Perio risk goes up as you age. Diversity of the ecosystem goes down.
Right.
So dysbiosis occurs. And it's like, okay, well, we know we're sitting on a treatment for the microbiome. So how is it working in seals, sea lions, snow leopards now, and gorillas and orangutans? So,
Amazing.
And it's working, which is cool.
That is so cool. I did notice, kind of moving through your technology online, that you have kind of two different types of technology. Oh, speaking of our friends,
Sorry.
it's okay.
Speaking of our friend, yeah, Cashew, he wants more treats.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? I know.
So you have two different technologies. One is the smart technology, and the other is a phospho. Correct me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We've actually stumbled on 32 different things that can change the metabolism of oral microbes. So in our pipeline, we've got things that can interrupt titanium redox, for instance, and that has an application in periimplantitis. There's other things where it stimulates certain microbes to secrete things that tighten the gap junctions in the mucosa. So that's actually, great application for healing and post-surgery and things like that.
Does that work
so,
when you have something like an implant? Because I know that is a huge issue.
Huge. Yeah. So, you definitely need to, what we know is you definitely need to starve the sugar eating microbes, because the staph and the candida that are around that are really causing tissue upset. And then you have some other microbes in there that are able to do the titanium redox and create those toxic oxides generated from the metal. So yeah, there's a lot of fun things we can do.
Wow. So you have two technologies in market, but a whole bunch in the pipeline. Yeah.
Whole bunch in the pipeline. Yep. So we found that basically by going after the metabolic capabilities of the microbes, we're able to have a more effective treatment or prevention or maintenance approach for oral. But the one thing is, it's a daily thing. It's not like a one and done.
Right.
Because microbes eat all the time.
Right. Do you see a position where you're doing personalized medicine approach, where you get the kind of phenotype or lay of the land ecologically with like a bristle test or something like that? And
I absolutely think that's the way where the field needs to grow. And not, even having RDHs ask about diet when their patients are in the chair, right? And talk about like, okay, well, just basic habits, like drink a glass of water after you eat.
Nice.
And like basic things just to dilute out all of that starch and the sugar and stuff like that. And stay hydrated. Those are the things that really, really do matter to flush the toxins that these microbes are making and the other things that they're making.
Right. There's for the immune landscape. Now, I did innate immunity and you did adaptive, but they're all, talking to each other.
Oh, totally.
Even though we're in two separate labs studying it in isolation. No harmony there. But anyway, my question is more about the systemic approach. You've lectured a lot on the oral systemic connection. Can you say more about how you found your technology in relationship to that systemic health landscape?
Yeah, just by customers' feedback and dentists and veterinary feedback, it's amazing what they're talking about as far as the connection between the effects they're seeing systemically from taking our oral care products. And that's in dogs, cats, humans. There's a case of a female in her 60s. She had, I saw her salivary test. She had high levels of Fusobacterium nucleatum subspecies Animalis. She had high candida and stuff. She went keto herself. And then she went on our product for 6 months. She lost 50 pounds and her Animalis went to unmeasurable.
Wow. And I bet she was in such a great mood too.
Yeah. But it's like those kind of phenomena. Or now we're up to 38 cases for skin and soft tissue infection and refractory MRSA cases because the mouth.
Wow.
you infect, you touch yourself all the time, right? So and we're finding that the MRSA is more often colonized in the throat and the oral cavity than it is in the nasal cavity.
Interesting.
By treating the mouth and the skin at the same time with the same stuff, staph and strep love sugar, boom, whether it's antimicrobial resistant or not, it's still going to eat sugar. So by blocking it, you're creating more, ecological pressure, and it's not going to win if it's sugar starved, because the other guys will just overcrowd over time and rediversify. So, and then we've got women's health that's popped up too. We know that women tend to crave sugar 2 to 3 days before their yeast infection pops up above the clinical threshold for symptoms. We've successfully now helped a lot of women that had recurrent and refractory bacterial vaginosis, yeast infections, and chronic UTI. So in fact, we just enrolled 2 women for clinical case studies over the week. For one is chronic UTI and the other one's got BV.
Amazing. That's incredible. So when are you
swallow
rolling out
these microbes?
Yes, absolutely. And they're not set. Well, do you believe in the blood microbiome? I have to ask.
I've always not been surprised. I remember it was a huge controversy, right? Everybody would criticize it. So, you contaminated your PCR, when everybody would pop up PCR positivity. But I mean, what came out recently from a Rockefeller publication in Stanford, my old lab actually, they published that there's a microbial escape that from the mouth in perio patients with rheumatoid arthritis usually precedes a flare and that totally makes sense. So, I don't know. I've always believed that nothing is sterile.
Yeah.
I mean,
it makes sense.
Sperm are coated with their own microbiome. An egg is coated with its own microbiome. They merge. Microbes are part of that mix.
Yeah. I feel like anytime, like when NASA and Jazz, and when they recently received the asteroid sample they collected, and went through all of those efforts, they're like, this is the most sterile environment ever. The asteroid sample is contaminated. I'm like, okay. Like you said, nothing.
Nothing. And these microbes are so adaptive and so durable. Yes. The fact that people think that they can throw, a chemical on it and not harm the host, but harm the bacteria is ridiculous.
Right.
Right.
I keep on telling people, like, we did a Invisalign aligner study in kiddos with orthodontic appliances, and we looked at bleach. So we did a 70% bleach solution for 30 minutes. Yeah. That didn't kill all the microbes on the aligner.
Oh my goodness.
That's how durable biofilms are. But, our sugar starvation got rid of their candida in
wow,
decent amount of time. So it's like, you got to speak the language that microbes speak, which is food.
So when are we all giving lectures on how often to change out your liners, just wholesale?
Right.
Wow, that's horrific.
Well, and toothbrushes.
Well, yes.
I wanted to follow up Camille's question with regards to the personalized aspect and opportunities to your technologies. Do you already have a feel for which delivery formats are more suitable for different conditions?
Yeah. So, everybody's going more consumer packaged goods these days. So you got to make it easy for people to take. You got to put it in don't create new routines. That doesn't work. So we've got, little sachets. You can put it in whatever you drink throughout the day, Yeah, exactly. And we're in the process of building gum, and we're in the process of putting it into things that they're already doing every day to make it easier. Right. The minute you create a new habit or try and do something different, the compliance goes way down. And so, we've been studying how to incorporate our ingredients into the aligner itself and have it elute.
Very good.
Looks like that's feasible. The O ties that you get a nasty biofilm around that don't get switched out for weeks on end. We know we can elute that out, so there's things we're doing that, slow development path, but really with the knowledge that the products on the market that are currently used, whether in the clinic or day to day, we've got to figure out ways to get our ingredients in them so that more people get the benefits.
There has been some suggestion, and I've not seen this in practice, but just to have the liners be perforated to some degree, like little micro holes so that saliva can still flow. And I don't know what the size would have to be for that to happen, just because mucus and right. But anyway, are you considering that angle as well?
Yeah, I like that angle a lot. I mean, because there's antimicrobial peptides in saliva. All these important things are in saliva that you need, and by blocking that and trapping, you're just really you're doing more, I think, than you realize, because the microbes and saliva work together in concert for either health or harm.
Right, exactly.
and by interrupting that, you have to. I love the idea of perforations. Pore sizes need to be bigger than 20 nanometer, to let the microbes in.
Right, exactly.
And the macro complexes.
Exactly. Yeah, I would love to see that just in practice. Are you collaborating with anybody to kind of create new opportunities?
Yeah, we've got 3 partners now. They each have their own brands of products in the market, and we're working on putting our active ingredients in their lines of products, in addition to just our stuff too.
Yeah.
So, because the more the merrier,
Yes.
it's really it's not about trying to exclusively do something. I don't believe that's good for public health.
Agreed. I'm with you there. All in. What do you do in your spare time?
What spare time?
I
know. What do I do in my spare time? I love to take walks with my dog. It's one of my favorite things in the world to see him happy when he finds a stick, or him raise his paw when he points because he sees something. It just makes me so happy. So, it's the little things, right?
Yeah.
And and hanging out with friends and reading books.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that
educational value.
I still haven't got into any fiction. I just actually started fiction. It's been a long time, but it's in audio form, so it feels like it doesn't count. But at the same time, I don't know about you, but I personally just feel like I chew on the same stuff until I get new input. And so having those moments of kind of relaxation and open-mindedness allows me to get more creative when I come back to work. Just recently looking, so you went after kind of the metabolites of the oral microbiome to kind of control the feeding. I was kind of doing it, but from a host standpoint, as far as what is the food, right? So I was trying to soothe the inflammation and starve out the perio-pathogens who can utilize those proteinaceous inflammatory cytokines.
Which totally makes sense too.
Right. So, but again, like the two hit punch is, I think, a huge part of the story. And when we're talking about systemic health, we think of things that maybe aren't solved in the rest of the body, so you can cure or help mitigate the risk in the mouth, but there still could be other things happening that put you at risk for that second hit, if you will. So I'm sure you're familiar with the 2-hit model that Glogauer kind of started. At least I think he started it. It could have been somebody else, but as far as I look at the mouth, it's his work. But in any case, the 2-hit model being, 2 insults. In his model, it was the gut and the mouth. But if you had them both were exacerbated. But if you could imagine, if you're just solving one, the risk is still there. So how do we kind of get at this larger issue of holistic health, I guess?
Right. I honestly think that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. and that you have got to look at your diet, your lifestyle, your stress levels, because people undervalue and underemphasize the cortisol and what cortisol and stress hormones really do. They change who's living in your body, literally. If you're female, you're basically a walking candidiasis risk factor, because they eat our estradiols and stuff. It's a food source for them. So, it's just like stress hormones, exercise, how often we drink, our lifestyle, like what kinds of foods we eat, how often we're happy and we laugh. Like those actually have an effect, believe it or not, on the constitution, not only of the immune system, but also the microbiome. You studied innate immunity,
Yes.
A fragile innate immune system means you're prone to a lot of chronic low-grade inflammation, which can lead to all sorts of stuff systemically.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, well, the thing that I'm mostly obsessed with is how our stress inflammatory landscape, especially in our mouths, can dictate how sick you might get from an insult or your allergy response or tolerance, sensitivity. So I think all of these things are in play, and I don't think people really appreciate it's that the landscape matters when you're introducing your food or your whatever COVID is in the air at the moment, or every dang respiratory virus known to man currently.
Right?
Yeah. And so if you have this challenge in your mouth where we create tolerance or sensitivity or
break tolerance.
Right, exactly. All of that applies. So yeah, I'm very much involved in that space. How would your technology kind of help in that regard?
Yeah, well, so we know that by growing certain beneficial microbes, they're able to actually send signals that we don't really understand yet that correlate strongly with immune regulation and self-regulation. And we know that, like in autoimmune disease, there folks like myself and my family, we can't shut our cycle off. It stays on and it's low grade.
Right.
And even though I've got some of those good guys growing in me now, thank goodness. And I just sampled my IL-6, my oral IL-6 levels. I was the lowest out of the R&D team that did it in Maryland last week.
That's incredible. That is such good news. Wow.
But it goes to show you that if you're, whatever this diet plan is doing, it's all about generating that diversity. So you don't even need our products if you eat a diverse diet and exercise well and do that stuff. But who has the time anymore to do all that? And who has the money to go to Whole Foods and buy organic everything and green leafies and beets and all that stuff and not overcook anything, turn it into like mushy carbohydrate, right? It's so hard. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's important to do though. And every so often. Yeah. So anyways, and the immune system is so tied to the nervous system, and the microbes are so tied to everything that, I mean, our microbes are making GABA and serotonin in the mouth.
I was not just about to bring that up. Yeah. Yeah. So they can set your mood. Actually, I just had a conversation with my dad. I'm outing you, Dad. We've been working on his oral microbiome for a little while, and he's improving, and it's fantastic. Everybody's happy. He's spending less time in the chair, finally. Cool. But the Tannerella won't come down. And I said, okay, so you're still at risk, but nobody else is there. So the risk is low. So what I will say, though, is it makes a ton of succinate, and that could be just giving you a good mood because it participates in the GABA pathway.
There we go.
And I was like, so, I mean, take your wins.
Right. Yeah. And I get these questions a lot from dentists, like, because my first startup was a diagnostic company. So I know enough to be dangerous about how firmly do you take these test results? Like, what do they mean? And if nothing changes, even though they're doing something different, what does that really mean? And I'm like, well, you only look for a test only looks for what it looks for, and it doesn't tell you what it doesn't look for. Yes. And you're trying to infer meaning, and you might be missed. So he might have a really diverse ecosystem now, but he's got one concerning microbe, which might be held in check by others. You don't know, or the immune system.
Or, I mean, we don't really look at the periopathogens and think, well, how could they be a beneficial? And I think that that's an important question that we've not solved. So I think in the small numbers, if you're degrading a little bit of the inflammatory cytokines, it's probably helpful. But in a large abundance, it's just feeding forward the issue.
So. Right. And this is where I think everything in moderation a little bit goes a long way. And I mean, who isn't these days colonized by methicillin-resistant Staph aureus? For sure. Most of us, right? But we're not suffering from skin and soft tissue infections or lesions of other ilks. And it's all about the balance in the ecosystem and keeping everything in check. And the immune system is playing a significant role in that.
Yeah. So when you first started Biohacking Grandma and you knew not to take away the beneficials, what was giving you, what kind of treatments were you considering as you were looking at like chlorhexidine, which is now demonized, or were you?
Yeah, that was one of the control molecules. I was looking at acetylpyridinium chloride, chlorhexidine. I even bought, now it's banned. Used to be in toothpaste.
Triclosan?
Triclosan. Yep. Thank you.
It's not banned. It's banned in Europe.
Yeah. Yep. So, you know, the really nasties of the nasties as far as the kill factor. And I know enough from rheumatology to know an immune system and immune maintenance is that if you get rid of good guys, because we constantly have to have some TLR-like signaling going on, right, for normal homeostasis. Oh, he is wanting a treat. Gosh.
Hey, and this is just a good time for our unofficial break.
It's treat time.
It's treat time. And so, I was looking at what would help the good survive. Because when you wipe out, again, you go on these massive antibiotics and things, that increases your risk for having autoimmune disease. And we know by sterilization of animals in labs is not a good thing. No. Right? Their inflammation goes up. And so, I was just always sensitive to the needs of us host animals and having good microbes growing in us and on us. They make a lot of good things, gut homeostasis, vitamins, minerals. They do a lot for our immune system, gut function, neuronal balance, everything, gut-brain axis. So it's really important.
That's one thing that I had been toying with for the whole of my kind of science research in oral health, in that, is it possible that we've kind of created the landscape of autoimmune increases due to our oral care regimen, just because we have been diminishing our diversity and ability to respond in that very important way?
Yeah, there's some really good work coming out of Germany showing that repeat exposures to antiseptics in oral care products actually may lead to accelerated mutation rates and increased resistance rates of other oral microbes in users on a daily basis. And so that's a really interesting question. And we do know that the hygiene hypothesis is a
right. Thing. It's true. Yes. I think that everybody wants to kind of diminish some of that research because microbes are scary, but it's hard to refute a lot of the evidence at this point.
Yeah, we're doing a 600 patient public health study right now, and we're actively looking at antimicrobial resistance markers in the mouths of people from 18 to 80 years old, and knowing what they use on a daily basis as far as their hygiene products.
Thank you.
Yep. And then seeing if, because we know we can curtail a lot of AMR microbes who love sugar in the mouth. So we're actually really looking at this.
That's incredible. I'm so appreciative. I can't tell you how many times I'm, sitting in pharmaceutical landscape and wishing that everybody understood that you think you have a healthy person, but you've never looked in their mouths. You don't know if they actually have
Yeah.
inflammation, and that can set the tone. So I think that some of our outcomes would improve if we actually had a way to test that more rigorously and simply, not requiring a dentist, for
Yeah.
example, and then how to combat
Right.
it effectively so that we can get that research. And then, yes, what are we using in our mouths, since they are all, to some level, a drug that is a continued exposure. So all of those are important pieces that I still feel very dissatisfied with currently, as we're running through clinical trials every day in every state of the field, and that is a major player. So yeah, I couldn't beat that drum louder if I tried. Anyway, I'm so grateful that you're doing all this work and really impassioned by it. How are you getting funding? Are you doing the grant cycle?
Well, I mean, the FDA and the NIH status is
Hmm.
questionable, which is really
I know.
scary right now. So much innovation is
Yeah.
fed by
Yeah.
grants, and that's on pause. So
Yeah.
I was just talking with a friend of mine. She's a professor at Johns Hopkins, and she was just like, I don't know, what's going to happen in 6 months.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're teamed up with a great lab in Baylor School of Medicine, and we're working on a application for orally derived fusobacterium that's correlated strongly with colorectal cancer, endometriosis, and head and neck cancers. And we've got some really cool data. So we hope that gets funded through the
Yeah,
SBIR,
yeah.
Small Business
Yeah,
Arm.
yeah.
And then the 600 patient study was luckily we can afford
Yeah.
that, but the Delta Dental Foundation of Minnesota kindly stepped up and did
Wow.
the funding on the because they really do care about population
Yeah.
health, which is great.
That's
So
amazing.
working with foundations.
Okay, so follow up on question on FNUC. Because it's a bridging organism, a lot of people have demonized it, and certainly there are strain variations. But with your assessment on FNUC, w- um, could we talk about the beneficials as it relates to the nitric oxide production?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So I really believe that most commensals like FNUC is they're overarchingly
Right,
neutral. They're not going to hurt, but too much of a good thing is not
right.
good. And it can behave differently based on who
Yes.
its nearest neighbor is. The strains that are nucleatum like animalis definitely are armed with slightly different genes that can actually um, really activate fibroblasts and other types of our cells to to change, right? And so that's not good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have no problem with FNUC, and it needs to be in people's mouths. It's a foundational aspect of the core oral microbiome. But again, too much of a good thing is
Right.
not good, and who its nearest neighbors are and what they do, and that crosstalk can be harmful, but most often is neutral or slightly beneficial.
Excellent. I'm so glad that you said that, because I've been feeling like some of these oral health tests where we're looking at our microbiome, they're kind of demonizing the FNUC. So like you get everything down and you still have FNUC, and I'm like, I think that's fine. I think that's great.
It's absolutely fine. Yeah. In fact, yeah, you might see it raise a little bit on our stuff just because it's starting to grow
Okay.
back, because it is sensitive to a lot of these
Right.
antiseptics. And you need it. It's serving a purpose. It's highly communicative. It's a highly social organism. Think about it
Right.
like that, right? It has to be at every party. It's an extrovert.
Amazing. I love that.
And and so
Still not
I
the
don't like to
Maserati,
think of
but an extra,
it's not the Maserati. No, it's probably like
a Datsun.
probably like a Cadillac. Yeah, 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 like the low end, like or Yugo, right?
I mean,
But it's important. It literally serves a purpose. It's a core foundation of all our infrastructure of a biofilm and its evolution. in biofilm development in the mouth and elsewhere.
Okay, last question on biofilm development for me, and that is when those pictures came out of Forsyth with those beautiful plumes showing PG in a healthy mouth, what was your first kind of reaction to those?
I knew it. That was my first.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
PG is, I mean, PG is PG. You know, some of us have it, some of us don't.
Most do.
Yeah.
Most do.
Low levels. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we're all on the same page. Jonathan, do you have any more questions?
Yeah. Like the transition is something we ask a lot of our guests that come onto the pod. Are there any books or forms of media that you're currently consuming?
Podcasts.
That you would like to share with us?
I like comedy podcasts. It makes me laugh these days because I need to laugh. You know?
Yes.
So
I understand.
Yeah. And then, you know, just, I mean, I like all the common ones. Like I listen to Chelsea Handler. She's inappropriate sometimes, and I really enjoy that. So yeah. And then it's just I tend to read a lot. Recently I've been reading about totalitarianism and autocracies and oligarchies. Just learn about that. And then I'm a history nerd, so
nice.
Love history podcasts.
What's your favorite one right now?
Very nice.
It's actually really, really interesting. It's called Betwixt the Sheets. And it's actually about like all sorts of things about stuff you've never learned about, but these people are focusing on like prostitution in Egypt, or like, you know, the history of the condom, or syphilis, and you know, and
cool.
I have no problem talking about STDs
all day, bring
like
it,
that, right? So right. Yeah. And so it's just like spans like medieval period and goes way back to Roman and Mesopotamia, and it's just really cool.
Very nice. I'm definitely checking that out. Thank you.
Check it out. It's a really good one.
Yeah, I'll throw into, if you're into the history and whatnot, one called Behind the Bastards.
Ooh.
That's a good pod that does some historical dives and also some contemporary dives.
Cool. I'll check it out.
What's happening?
Behind the Bastards. Awesome.
Nice. I'm definitely in on this. I'm reading. Speaking of history, I'm not a buff, and I could be better. So I was gifted this book called The Fourth Turning is Here, and it's talking about the seculums. And the first half of the book was hard for me because I don't have a very strong standing in history, so I had to kind of build the infrastructure to land some of the information. But the premise is basically kind of identifying the life cycle of a society and how it peaks and valleys, and that we're in a sharp valley, obviously. But using those theories in the last half of the book to posit where we're going. And I think that it's really fascinating. It's very present day. I think it was published in 2024. So it has current day politics up through 2023, which gives a very strong kind of idea of where we were going at the time and where we're continuing to go now. Yeah.
It's really interesting times.
Fascinating.
Really
Yeah.
You know what's funny? Our company just got labeled DEI.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, it'll serve you next time around.
Congratulations.
I'm like, well, if I'm the CEO and I did all the hiring of myself and others, and I'm called DEI, how does that work?
Well,
being female.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah.
I think that's worth them.
I want to Google
that. 5. Oh, well, thank you for coming on today. It's been a delight. I am just enthralled with your research and very much looking forward to more. And, you know, if grants are still a thing, I would love to play with you. Well, we'll sign off, and let's get on.